Hello and welcome to the Scuttlebutt Podcast. Our kind of not so special guest. You're not a special guest because
I'm not.
You're literally the fucking host of this show. Tim, welcome to the show. We're doing your interview today.
I'm excited.
I am too. You're literally one of my long-term best friends. You're somebody who I do this podcast with. I don't know what to say. We're here to tell your story today, though.
Yeah, let's jump into it.
I want to start out by saying that I am going to be absolutely ruthless in this interview. And like the amount of people have been getting off the hook easy with some easy questions, but I know enough about you to dig in where it hurts, hopefully.
Perfect. So, wonderful. Really pull out all the stories that I have hidden away. That's awesome.
Right. The closet door is open and the skeletons are coming out. So
thank God.
No, I truthfully have been looking forward to doing this interview, and I weirdly think that even though I know you really well, I think that I'm going to learn something. So I think that this will be good and help give our listeners some backstory about you, and then we'll do my interview as well. So I'm looking forward to it. So Tim, give us the not so quick version of what brings you here today.
Okay, so it's not a very unique story, but
after 12 interviews of people telling the exact same story,
correct,
we are not unique anymore.
Yes, I thought it was before I started doing this podcast, but no, I grew up in upstate New York with a big family. I have 3 siblings, so I'm one of 4 in a family of 6, and really sucked as a student in high school. I was more worried about what the people were doing around me than actually focusing. And so when I graduated high school, I jumped right into community college and realized very quickly I was not a college person at that time in my life. I'm still not a college person. But
the fact that you haven't been back since should say that you are not a college person.
Yeah. So no, I tried the college thing on and off for a few years, just same thing as high school, man. I was too concerned about making friends and being cool than actually doing that. So I moved out of my parents' house when I was 19. 20. Yeah, moved out of my parents' house when I was 19, and then just fucking hit rock bottom. Was super broke, working at Best Buy. My car had broken down. I had no money to fix it. So my dad had to come and bail me out. And he was like, "Are you ready to stop being a dumbass and move back home?" I was like, "Yeah, that's fine. I have, $14 in my account. So let's do that." So at this point I'm 20. I moved back home, which was kind of ego crusher, because I thought I was this independent dude. Moved back home and same thing, still working at Best Buy selling cell phones. And I came home from Best Buy one day. I was laying on my parents' couch in my Best Buy uniform, and a Navy commercial came on, and I was like, yeah, I'll do that. That to me is something. It's that's what's the word I'm looking for? Notable. Yeah, that's it's a notable thing to do. I wouldn't just be the Best Buy guy anymore. I'd be in the military, and at the time I was big into fitness, and so I was that's not a concern for me, and joined the military.
What was a concern for you at that time? And I'm going to kind of bury the lead here a little bit. In preparation for this conversation, I called your dad, and I spent hour and a half, 2 hours on the phone with your dad, Tom. Asking him some questions about the early Tim. A lot of the stuff I already knew, but a couple notes that I have here, if you will.
Oh my God.
He said that you thought of yourself as, quote, Mr. Atlas.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Yep.
okay. Aimless was a word that he used. Um, Only concerned about social connection, which was what he viewed was a downfall to
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Yeah.
More focused on like people than, and sorry, Tom, I'm kind of outing you here a little bit, but yeah, I mean, is that what was important? It's just the people and kind of like
For
we're here
sure.
for a good time, not a long time, sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, like, I never. I guess like there's like a couple different ways I could go with this. Like when I was in high school, there were certain things that interest me. And like if I something interests me, I like doubled down on it. And like that was what I was focused on. I was like very entrepreneurial in high school. And I would like I'd wholesale like shoes to people that I would like get from overseas. I would like sell candy in like fifth grade. Like it was like that. I was like I would double down on that, but like I don't give a shit what a sedimentary rock is. You know what I mean? Like I don't care what like I don't care about what George Washington did or like it yeah. So that yeah, I mean that's pretty like spot on as I was just kind of like aimless, you know what I mean? And that's the crappy part too, is like when I was in high school, if you were to look at like the stuff that I was doing, you probably wouldn't have like if it was a TV show and you were watching it, you probably would think like that I would be very ambitious once I got out because I had that entrepreneurial like side of me, but I like got out of high school and just like lost that and was just like aimlessly like going to college classes that I had never did work for and then working at Best Buy and like coming home and when I lived with my parents like laying on their couch and then like going to hang out with friends like being around my friends and like being social, that's what was important to me at that time.
I didn't realize that you were like doing those little like sales hustles like when you were that young.
Yeah.
Like we're gonna get into like your sales experience and like I think that that's a really critical component that's kind of tied to your socialite tendencies that like makes you really good at it. But that's interesting. That's something that you've always done.
if
I didn't know
you
that.
if you ask my mom, she'll tell you I started my first business when I was in fifth grade. Do you remember Yu-Gi-Oh cards? I'm assuming.
Oh yeah, I was more
Yeah,
of a
yeah.
Pokemon guy, but
Okay. So Yu-Gi-Oh cards were super big when I was in fifth grade. And in the show, they had the big dual disc, like that thing that they would play the card game and they would like wore it on their arm.
yeah,
I don't know if you remember.
I'm
So
tracking.
I designed this like elastic card deck holder that you would wear on your bracelet out of elastic. And I would go to the store. I told my mom about this idea at the time. I didn't know how to sew. She does. So I like told her about it. I said, I need you to sew these. Like, look, it's super easy. It's like 3 loops of elastic and I can make 8 of them for $1.50 and I can sell them for $2 a piece. And so like that's what I did. And like everybody in my grade like had these like makeshift dual discs out of elastic, and every one my mom made I would pay her 25 cents. So like I had an employee, like I would
Wow.
distribute, yeah, like in fifth grade. uh and so that is, my mom and I still laugh about that. She's like, you were running a fucking sweatshop. Like you paid me 25 cents per, you know what I mean? I'm like, hey mom, those margins are tight. Like I have to,
Right. Yeah.
I
Cost of
gotta,
materials. That's good. It's crazy
yeah.
out here.
But yeah, no.
That's crazy that you were doing that young. And I had like a specific line here earlier that I want to talk about, but like you like haven't read a fucking sales book in your entire life. Like
No.
I know that
Yeah.
you haven't, and like what
I've
we've made so
purchased a
many
couple.
jokes about. Oh, I know you have. I've given you some.
Yeah, yeah.
But like I know that you haven't read those types of books, but it just is crazy to me that that kind of thing comes so naturally to you.
Yeah.
So that's funny. I didn't know that story.
Yeah.
That's cool. um
Uh
so you're out there slinging Yu-Gi-Oh cards, only care about your friends, and literally the really awesome Navy commercials just enticed you.
yeah, oh,
Those
yeah.
commercials are so bad. They it's all
Oh,
the
awful.
sweat guys on the boats, and they're like
Oh
they're
yeah.
just
Oh
shooting the
yeah.
machine guns, and you're like, yeah, that's gonna be me.
Well, I had thought about joining the army a couple years before that. Same thing. It was like I think this was like I thought about joining the Army the first time I dropped out of college, because I went back to college twice and would like took some time off and like went back. So I thought about joining the Army. My dad was like, yeah, I don't think you're not wired for the Army. You know what I mean? Like it's not that's not you. So, and I like did research. I was like, yeah, fuck that. I don't want to like live in the desert. You know what I mean? I also had no desire to like kick doors in and like get into firefights and stuff. Like I didn't give a shit about doing that. So yeah, then this Navy commercial came on. I had been exposed to the Navy quite a bit. My family and we went to Virginia Beach on like a summer vacation every year. Since I was little. So that's obviously like where we were stationed. So that's a massive like Navy area. So the planes and all like the aircraft and stuff like that really has always interested me. I thought that it was cool. So the Navy commercial came on and I was like, well, I'm not gonna more than likely like not gonna get into a firefight. Like I'm not gonna be a grunt kicking indoors. So let me, if I can go like work with my hands and like fix stuff, which that was also that was also something that I was very good at a young age, was like using tools and like building things and taking things apart and figure out how they work and put them back together. So I got up after this commercial, walked up to my parents' room and I was like, hey guys, I'm gonna join the Navy tomorrow. And my dad was like, okay, like perfect. I'll take you, like, have you thought about what you want to do? My dad was like jazzed up because he knew
my prayers are answered. Like,
yeah. He's like, I have my fucking adult son sleeping on my couch again. You know what I mean? And my dad always would tell me like, you're so smart. Like you are like, you could do anything. Just fucking apply yourself. Like you're just wasting your life, So I told my parents. My dad was jazzed up. Of course, my mom was like, what do you mean? Like, are you sure? She was nervous. So yeah, my dad and I went to the recruiter's office the next day together, and I took like a practice ASVAB and I crushed that. I think on the practice one, which is always harder than the actual one, I think I got like a 70. And my recruiter was like, yeah, man, like you can get almost any job you want. Like this is good. Went there and I signed up to be an avionics technician. And and then I left 7 months later and went to boot camp. That was super eye-opening to me going into boot camp.
Before you dive into that, I want to ask, because I think that this is something that's going to come up later. What are your friends thinking about at this time? Because I'm always curious to hear, and mostly just curious because I know how like my experience like dealing with my friends at the time. What are you spend all your time with your friends and that's all you care about. What do they say about this?
My like, I guess my like very close friends were like not about it, and for selfish reasons, like they did not want me to leave. But everybody else that I was like not super close with was like, oh yeah, dude, like that's awesome, like that's good for you, because I wasn't super close with them. I've always been kind of the type of person where like once I find my like group of friends, like that's it. Obviously, I mean, look at you, me, and Ian for our entire fucking Navy careers. So like my close friends were not super supportive of it because they didn't want me to leave, but I was also at a point where like my close friends at the time were like really making these advances in their lives that I was like not making. And I was getting left behind. You know what I mean? So I was like, no, I need to do this. I need to leave this small town. I need to like go fucking make something of myself. And like, I need some guidance, put a little money in my pocket and be something, So, and they understood and they ultimately supported me. But like I said, selfishly, they didn't want me to do it. It just says, I didn't want you to move to Virginia. You know what I mean? Like for my own selfish reasons. So.
Well, and it's interesting that they are kind of like making their own moves and like kind of advancing and like almost, not trying to support you doing the same thing. I was kind of almost expecting it to be the other way. They're like, where, kind of the misery loves company type ideas.
Yeah.
Like you've got a bunch of people that are like all not going anywhere
Yeah.
together. And it's like, oh, you want to go do something? Like, no, we don't want that,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
it's kind of like I'm gonna use like a How I Met Your Mother reference. Like I almost felt like the Barney of the group. If you've ever met How I Met Your Mother, or if you've ever seen How I Met Your Mother, I know you have obviously, but for the
we've
listeners,
watched a lot of that.
oh yeah, because like everybody like has relationships and is like has like a lot of things going on, but Barney is just kind of like he's the dude that's there for a good time, the ladies man, you know what I mean? Like small group of friends that I had is three brothers. Like one of them, and this is kind of foresight to like how I got into the car business, but like one of them had gotten into the car business and was like fucking crushing it, had a kid, like got married. The other brother is like crushing it in college. They both were both younger brothers were doing college and kind of killing that. And so it was like, okay, you guys are doing all of this stuff and like getting married and like now you're making all this money, and or like you're like crushing it in college. I'm making $400 every 2 weeks working at Best Buy, and I'm spending every penny I have to like hang out with you guys. So I don't want to say, I guess I made it sound like they weren't supportive. They definitely supported me, but again, there was like that first initial of like, no dude, like I can get you a job at the dealership, or they did like offer ways to like, dude, if it's just about money, like I can get you a way to make better money. But in my head I was like, no, like there's something about it. I was like, no, I need to go do this, even though they were really offering me a solution for my problem, which at that point was money. They were like, no. I was like, no, I have to go do this. Like this is for some reason what I'm meant to do. So I'm going to go.
Yeah. That is one thing that you have like stayed incredibly consistent on in the time that I've known you. When you take about 0.5 seconds to decide anything, and then you're
Yeah.
just like all in. And
Yeah.
it like hasn't ever burned you to my knowledge. And so I don't like it, but I gotta respect it.
Yeah, I just like I don't, dude, I've said it for years and years, like I'm just gonna wing it. Like tests, college, big decisions in life, like I'm just gonna wing it. Like it's okay. Like presentations at school, best man speeches, like I'll wing it. Like we'll figure it out. You know,
Right. Hey,
that's
well,
funny.
it served you incredibly well. And that was one of the things I told your dad. I was like, I don't know what the word is for this, but Tim just, it has to be more than luck. But for the longest time, I thought it was luck.
Yeah.
I don't know how you get so like from the outside looking in lucky on
Yeah.
stuff, but I think that it kind of comes back to some of your um ability with people or whatever. But
What
we
do
can
you
get
mean?
into that later.
Like what is something that I've gotten like lucky with?
Oh my God. Anybody that knows you that listens to this will be like, Tim is the luckiest dude that I've ever met. Anytime
That's
that you've
funny.
had to like travel and there's like, oh, I just happened to like get first class seats, or like you somehow like wait till the last second to do something, and like over preparers like me are just like worried and anxious and like trying to do all this prep, and like you end up getting a better result like
That's
from
so
not
funny.
even preparing for it. I should have thought of a list, but there's a very long list
That's
that
funny.
exists. But yeah, we can get into that. Go ahead. You're in boot camp. Kind of get us into joining
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Navy and kind of end that portion.
Yeah. So going to boot camp, that was like very eye-opening. Just like my dad said, I thought I was like the epitome of fitness. I was like very wrong. Like, oh, they like whooped my ass. And I'm sure anybody that's listening that's like a Marine or Army vet, I was like, okay, pussy. But like it really was just like super shocking to me.
Picked up with boots on just got like way harder.
Oh yeah, dude. And like the flutter kicks and like all this shit. And like you don't realize like your boots weigh like 4 pounds, which is a fuck ton of weight when you're like doing, what do they call them? Like 6 inches or whatever. You're like holding your feet over,
Yeah.
feet up. Yeah. But yeah, no, like it was cool. I eye opening. I got into good shape. I was like bulking up really quickly before I left, just because I was like working out a shitload and like eating a lot. And like at one point, I went to go like weigh in when you like do that every couple months when you're in dep or whatever. And my recruiter was like, all right, rock, like chill out on the fucking protein shakes. You've gained 8 pounds in 7 months. Like you're about to be overweight here. Like chill the fuck out. So anyway, so yeah, I got through boot camp and then was down in Pensacola, Florida for training. And that is where I met you.
That is where we met.
Yes.
For anybody unfamiliar with this us meeting story, a lot of people will be. There was something like super unique about you that like really attracted me to you, and I can probably count on one hand how many people that I've like felt that about. But you, just the way that you kind of like carried yourself, like, I mean, we're like walking around the barracks, but like
Yeah.
you had this kind of electric energy, and like everybody just it was literally like a cloud of people that always kind of like moved around you. And like
Huh.
you could tell that you were like, I don't want to say like the center of attention, but you had a way of like kind of building this social circle that everybody kind of knew who you were and like kind of wanted to be around you. And I was one of those people.
Yeah.
I literally, I saw you one day and I was like, I'm going to be friends with that guy, like no matter what it
That's
takes.
funny.
And like, I mean, to cut to the chase, like it took me trying to get you to hang out like 10 times.
I think it was like 2, but
It was at least 3 or 4, dude. Like one of
yeah,
the times
maybe.
you were out of town, the other you were volunteering,
Yeah.
quote unquote. Yeah, no, I'm glad it ended up working out. But
For the listeners, because I do kind of want to tell the story. So we were in the same barracks in Pensacola, Florida. He had added me on Facebook. Obviously, we like knew of each other. And he had messaged me on Facebook, like I guess we'll say like a few times, 3-4 times.
it felt like it felt like 30 times, but
So he had messaged me 30 times on Facebook, like asking me to hang out or like off, like, hey, I'm doing this. Like, do you want to go? And I kind of I didn't. I was like, oh, I already have plans or whatever. And it was, for the record, I was like not trying to like not hang out with you. I just had like already had plans or whatever. And then we were out at some bar like we did, and I ran into Brock, and I was like, oh, dude, like, we kind of started chopping it up, and then got blasted. Went back to I hung out with Brock all night. We went back to the barracks room, went to our like separate rooms, and we were like, all right, dude, like I'll see you tomorrow for breakfast. Woke up that Sunday for breakfast, went to the galley, ate in fucking absolute silence because we were just feeling like crap, and walked back to the barracks and like went our separate ways and took a nap. And I think we've been together ever since. Like that meal was so iconic because there's not many. It's so hard to like meet somebody where you could like sit down and eat and like not say a fucking word, but just like enjoy their like just being there. You know what I mean?
the company,
Yeah, yeah, for real. And it's like we did, like I think we maybe said a total of 5 sentences that entire like during that like that next morning. And then it was like, yeah, that's my best friend. Like
Well, and what's weird too is that like that kind of thing comes from like I feel like years of like friendship development, and I felt like it literally just appeared
yeah,
overnight.
yeah,
And I was like, oh wow, like it in past friendships that I had, I was like, that you don't just like get to that point. Like one day
right,
you kind of just notice it. And you're like, oh wow, like that's I don't like we don't need to be talking all the time, but
yeah.
I knew that that was something interesting right off the bat. I also have another funny story about a time at the galley there in Pensacola, very early on in our friendship. I knew I was kind of like dealing with another caliber of human being when we go in. I, for
I know
anybody like
exactly where you're going.
I know that you do. For anybody unfamiliar, you just kind of like during the week, there's the galley, you go and eat just with your friends, you wait in line, and it's just whatever. The food is always there. You can be out in town and come back and eat, whatever. but during the week you mostly eat there. I don't know what we were doing, but we went in to eat dinner one day, and you see this pasta bar. And I mean, they have like, you go through the main line of the galley and you're like, okay, here's all this food. They have like a little salad bar. And then like a couple times a week, they'd have like a pasta bar, which thinking back on like sounds really ludicrous because I don't know why that existed, but there'd be like a couple types of noodles. There's like kind of a marinara sauce and whatever. And I'm like watching you go through this line, and you go like you had like been pretty open, like you love to eat, you're all about the carbs, whatever. But there was a particular day when you grabbed 2 slices of bread from the main line. You go over to the pasta bar and you make this must have been like a Scooby-Doo, like a 6-inch sandwich. You pile on this pasta onto the bread and then douse it in Parmesan cheese, not even any sauce or anything, and just put the other slice of bread on top. And you just crush this pasta sandwich that must have been like 2,000 calories right there just in that sandwich. And that was just like the supplement to your meal. Yeah. And I was like, man, who is this guy? Like, what?
Oh gosh, I remember you being so fucking disgusted at that. You literally like looked at me. You're like, Tim, what are you doing? And so casually, pasta sandwich, dude. Like,
right, like it was just literally no big deal. It was a big deal. That's a problem.
God, dude, that I dream about that pasta bar sometimes.
I mean,
pasta
it was
bar
good.
was next level.
Not on a sandwich, but I have been questioning your food choices for a long time, and that was that might have been the start of it.
It probably was. Yeah. So anyway, so that's where I meet you. Go through training. The like amount of schooling was weird too, because I felt like I was like back in college, but it really took the pressure off because that was my job, right? Like you were getting paid to be there Monday through Friday in class, passing tests and stuff like that. I never fucking studied, but it still like, it did allow me to kind of like focus on this. And again, it was something that I was interested in. So I like doubled down on it, and I would pass all the tests and stuff like that. And then got stationed in Norfolk, Virginia. And 6 months later, you also went to Virginia. Our buddy Ian was there before either of us. He was kind of like our third half, who was always with us. But anyway, so I was in Norfolk shortly after you'd gotten to Virginia. That's where I met Jessica, my wife, through you. And that's where I spent most of my career, or all of my career actually, was Norfolk, Virginia.
Lucky us.
The armpit of America.
Right. I was listening to one of our past episodes and you called it that, and it got a chuckle out of me. One thing that's unique, I think, about coming here and that I'm grateful for in hindsight is I think the lack of things to do here, like, really forced our hand into like being friends, because it was like, well, we don't really have anything to do.
Yeah.
For anybody that's unfamiliar with this area, I don't know. I personally think that you can like really find a lot to do anywhere you go. I don't know what it is about this place, but there's nothing to do.
Well, that's like the weird thing is like there's so much to, excuse me, it feels like there's so much to do, but then there's like nothing to do. Like you have the beach, okay, and there's like obviously normal stuff, but it's weird. It like really feels like there's like fucking nothing to do there, but it's also like very busy. So it's like, what is everybody doing? like where are you all going?
Where can we be a part of whatever is happening? Well, and that kind of just led us to really be just like going out a lot. I think that that's what primarily a lot of people are doing here. And maybe that's military culture, or maybe it's something about here in general, but like really what there is to do is to like drink and party. Like there are so many bars in this area, and like you want to go to the beach, like, oh, you're getting, and especially coming from Pensacola too, we had just spent 6 months on the beach, like every single day, and you like, that was just what we did. So you talked about meeting Jessica. what was kind of like your relationship? You don't have to get into too much nitty gritty detail, but like
Sure.
views on relationships coming up into Jessica.
Yeah. Back to like the Barney Stinson reference. I was always like the single friend, like I'd never really had like a long-term girlfriend. I know she's gonna listen to this. So I don't want to say that like I was a player, but I was like not I got bored quickly with girls and I would just like, okay, you're not the one for me. Move on. I was always like pretty good with girls. And maybe that had something to do with it, but yeah, I was never had a like a long-term girlfriend before. So that's it was just never on my mind, I guess.
Yeah. Tim was one of those people in Pensacola where he was that friend that would like unashamedly go up to the group of just like 10 hot girls at the bar that every guy was afraid to talk to. And he'd
Yeah.
just like stroll up there like he had literally nothing to lose. And like, I don't know, maybe that was kind of that lucky element that we were talking about earlier, but like you just have like a way of like kind of schmoozing and
Yeah. Well, I
you
used
have
to
kind of an
tell
electric personality.
my roommate when I moved out of New York, his name's BJ. He was a good buddy of mine. I would like try to help him. Obviously, I'm like 19, 20, doing what every 19, 20-year-old's doing, going out and chasing tail. And I would like try to help him, like quote unquote, get girls or like, be Mr. Suave. And I would literally tell him like at 19, 20 years old, like, dude, going and talking to this girl is a zero risk, high reward situation. So she tells you, no, I have a boyfriend, or like, I'm good. Like, I appreciate it. Okay, whatever. Like, thank you. Like, have a wonderful night. Enjoy your night. Take care. Like, it's no risk to it. And that's the way that I always looked at it with anything, not even with girls, but just like really any interaction or trying to make a connection with anybody. Like, it's a no risk situation. Why not? Everybody in the bar, just like you said, every dude in the bar is thinking it. Why not go talk to her?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, you have a really good way of like balancing out that equation and understanding, like you said, that it's zero risk. There's
Yeah.
nothing really at stake in this decision. And I think that there's some spillover into some of those other things that we were talking about, like your split decision making. A lot of times there's really not as much on the line as you think that there might be.
Yeah.
Um, what was, oh, I mean, we, within our close friend group, we joke that your now wife, who you've been married to for several years, you guys have 2 kids, like life is great. We joke that Jessica kind of plucked you and like decided that you guys were going to be an item.
Yeah.
What were your early perceptions of Jessica? Because it like I would probably argue that she wasn't like the type that I would think that you would have gone for. And like history will show that like I actually deliberately tried to keep you guys from getting connected,
Yeah.
just because I believe that so strongly. But what were kind of like your early perceptions there? Because I think that that represented a very large shift in just like, I don't know,
Yeah.
like how seriously you were taking your life, you know?
Yeah. My wife is very attractive. So like obviously my like initial reaction. So the reason why people make the joke that like my wife like quote unquote hand picked me, or the claw machine came down and like plucked me out, I was like, you are going to be my husband now, is my Jessica, it was friends with you before you had joined the Navy, and obviously we are very good friends, and we had pictures on social media and stuff like that. And there was a picture of you and me and our buddy Franco in the bar holding like these fish bowls, and we're these massive blue drinks. And apparently that was the picture where my wife was coming to visit you and kind of hang out for a little bit. And she was like, I want to meet this Tim kid, you know? And so I think you had tried to set her up with one of our other friends so that
That's very true.
yeah, so that I wouldn't so I wouldn't meet her. And she had literally said like, no, I want Tim. Like I want to meet Tim.
In preparation for the show, I actually was like scrolling back to our old pictures, and I saw that photo, and it's not the most flattering photo of you.
It's not. Then that's like that's the funny thing, as like we definitely have like I have like better pictures out there, but yeah, no, I don't know what it was, because like at that time I never had a serious girlfriend. I'm a young military dude, and I'm just like having fun with my best friends, like doing our thing and loving life. And the last thing I would have ever thought was that I was gonna like settle down so quickly. But there was just something. When I had met Jess, we spent 36 hours together. She got there in the middle of the night on Saturday because she drove up from Florida, and she left Monday morning. Like 36 hours, that was it. And there was just something of like, we had kind of both initially went into it thinking like this will just be like a fun little weekend. But I remember texting her as she was like at the airport after I dropped her off, and she's like, we both were just kind of like, we don't want to like lose contact. And it was just like the weirdest thing. Also the other thing too is when I met Jessica, she has a daughter. Her daughter was 2, which at 20, I just turned 22 right before I met her. At 22 years old, if you were to tell me like that I would have been cool with stepping up into a father role, I would have told you were fucking crazy. But there was just something about it that I was okay with. Like she obviously told me like very, very quickly within like the first few messages back and forth, because she had added me on Facebook before she came out. And she's like, yeah, I have a 2-year-old daughter, and this is what I do. And for some reason I was just like, cool, like that's awesome. And it like didn't phase me, which is weird because was not on brand for me.
Really wasn't.
Yeah, like anybody else. And I have no rhyme or reason for it, but like at that, thinking back, what that be 6 years ago, I would have thought I would have been like, I'm good. I'm not ready for that type of like commitment. But for some reason in my head, I was like, cool, that's awesome. What, like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? It was weird.
Well, and it was so weird for all of the rest of your friends too. We're like all on the sidelines, and like
Yeah.
we're being like, we've just spent the last like year or so like going out to the bars every weekend, just like you said, trying to chase girls and like do just crappy stuff, I don't know what the right word is there, but
Just being
we're
kids,
yeah,
we're
we're
like
being
being
kids,
21-year-olds, 21,
right?
22-year-olds in the military. Like,
Really trying to
it's,
think we can flex on everybody, and
yeah,
think that we mean something. And I think that everybody enjoyed that. And so it was so weird for we were all just like, dude, what? Like, what are you
yeah,
talking about? You want to get into a relationship? Like,
yeah.
um,
Not to mention, she was across the country. We were living in Virginia, and she was living in Idaho at the time. So not only was it like I was getting into a relationship, which was off brand. I was also like stepping into being a dad, and a long distance, and not like a couple hours, like a fucking 8-hour flight, like across the
right.
country, long distance. There
Yeah,
was
it's
just
like
like all these
3,000
things, like,
miles.
yeah, it's like, was all these things kind of going against us. And from the outside looking in, I'm sure, like, as my best friend, you're just like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? But
Yeah.
like I said, like my initial reaction, like I can't explain it. I was just like, this is what I want. Like, split second decision. You know what I mean? That this is it. This is what I want to give it a whirl.
Yeah. I think that we're going to come back to this a little bit later because your role has like developed much more since that point, but you have like filled that role so well and like always been kind of like a step ahead, I think, of ahead of the rest of us, and kind of like maturity a little bit. And we all have kind of like followed like your footsteps of like life stages. But yeah, you've done a phenomenal job, and that probably was the tipping point of like the rest of your kind of like adult life beginning.
Yeah,
Like
for sure. Yeah.
it was in that moment, the trips to the bar went to a
Decreased
decline. Like it might have been
substantially.
flat for a
Yes.
little bit, but then that was the
Yeah.
peak.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, I want to talk about the Navy just in general. So you end up working at two different helicopter squadrons. You really excel. Like you're a phenomenal technician. You're great in like your work centers. People love you. The biggest thing for me is that like you love it. Like
Yeah.
you literally, of all of the people in our friend group, all we did was complain and bitch about like being in, just like most of the people in. One of the things that stood out to me about your time in is you were the one person that loved the
Yeah,
Navy.
I did. I
Why
did.
why is that?
Um, I think that it's kind of a combination of things. Like it was I mean, again, I was like kind of a bum, and then I like joined the Navy, and I'm like making better money than I had ever made in my life at the time. So like the money aspect of it, the social aspect of it, of like I'm meeting all of these people. I have literally the best friends that anybody could ever have. Like I'm lucky enough to like achieve that and like have you and our other friend Ian that are just like people sometimes never get that, like never get that opportunity to like make those friends. So like to me, I wouldn't say that I loved the work necessarily. The being a technician was like cool, but I just like loved where I was like in life. I'd gone from selling phones at Best Buy and like being the quote unquote like Best Buy guy. I remember I like ran into this girl that I was like kind of talking to. I ran into her and her friend at the bar one time. And this is like before I joined the Navy. And her friend literally said to me, "Oh, you're the Best Buy guy." Like, yeah,
Ooh.
yeah.
That
And like
was
fucking stung. And I remember just being like, that was like kind of the initial like I need to do something else. Like, what the fuck am I doing?
well,
But
it's funny that you bring up like you almost said this like word for word just now, but again in research of and preparation for this interview, I literally have a quote from an Instagram picture caption that you wrote that says, "Life is funny. One day I'm on the couch selling cell phones. The next thing I know, I'm living the life I always wanted."
yeah,
Is that end quote? Uh, is the what was it about that was so different? You had the friends already.
yeah.
I mean, the money is a little
I
bit different, but like
Well,
just
and
the
that's the thing.
perception.
Well, yeah, yeah, right. And so like I've always been the type to care about what people think of me. I always like want to be the cool guy. So I think a big portion of it too was like one really cool thing that, and I was kind of also like thinking about this type of thing in preparation for this, but like one big thing was like it allowed me to kind of like a fresh start, almost like going to like a new school. Like I was never the new kid at school. I was in the same school my entire life, but like I was in such a small town and like my group of friends and stuff like that. Like I was always like perceived the same way that I was in 8th grade as I was in 10th grade as I was at 20 years old. Like, so it was just like I was able to leave my hometown, like start over, do something that is like very honorable, and like I'm not the Best Buy guy anymore. So now I can like tell people like, yeah, I'm in the Navy. I fix helicopters, which I loved. And I was able to like kind of rebrand myself almost and like start out like people don't know me from when I was in 8th grade and like this goofy kid, but like they know me for like the person that they're seeing. And so I was able to just kind of like be who I wanted to be instead of like having to change somebody's perception of me because they had known me for 20 years. You know what I mean? So I would say, to answer your question, that's why I loved it so much, is I was with my best friends doing a job that I did like my job, and I was on my own, and I was doing something that was honorable, and people thought it was cool, but I was just like loving life.
Well, and I think that that small town mentality sort of thing, I don't know if there's a way to really escape who you were before without leaving.
Yeah.
I truly believe that. And sometimes you really just have to separate yourself from maybe your history. And it's not like you had like done anything bad. You didn't have
No,
like this
no.
rap sheet or whatever, but like you had all of these perceptions about you that were a certain way. And probably, I think I know that you care about your perceptions of or other people's perceptions of you, but I think that there's also the perception of yourself that
Yeah.
you can only be what you can kind of imagine in this
Yeah.
small town. Maybe you'll only be the Best Buy guy because everybody just has told you that for so long.
Yeah. Yeah.
And kind of breaking out into this uncharted area kind of expanded the horizons of what you thought yourself could do.
Yeah, for sure.
Did any of your viewpoints about your friends or like your kind of back home life
Yeah.
change like kind of as you're like going through your time in the military?
100%. Um, it's funny that you say that, and I don't know if my dad got into this with you. I'm sure he did because he's probably told the story a million times. Um, but like I always like before I was in the Navy, I thought that I had like the greatest of friends, and it couldn't be better. But joining the Navy, there's just like something about kind of like being in the suck with somebody like you're the best worst time of your life, and then you're doing that together. You definitely the bonds are way stronger. And my dad will tell you like you don't want to be in a he used to tell me all the time, would you want to be stuck in a foxhole with those people? And I'm like, yeah, of course, dad. But then you join the Navy, and I get friends that I actually would want to be in a foxhole with. And that's not to say that my friends from back home are not still my good friends. It's very different because the things you experience together are different, so it takes it to that next level, I think. But yeah, 100%.
Other than or like having a similar shared experience, what do you think about your criteria for selecting friends or how
Yeah.
you build friendships has changed? Because I know at least kind of from my perspective and like what people have like told me about our friendship, I literally it would take me like a piece of paper to write down all of the names of people that have come to me and said like people that we have brought to like come and hang out with us before, and people are like, I've never seen anything like this.
Yeah, just
Like
like
that.
such a strong like it's like such a strong connection. Like it's like from the outside looking in, when we bring somebody in, you almost look at it, and people have literally said it, like it's in like near impossible to try to break into this friend group.
Well, and
I
we
think.
joke about the anybody that like is our friend that is listening to this, we like have this running joke about the quote unquote like the group of
Yes.
like it's just like our really close friends or whatever. And like we joke about it being exclusive, it really never was. It's just
No.
like the bar was so high, like
Yes.
you need to like basically make a blood oath like to get
Yeah.
into this friend group. I
Yeah.
don't know what that was though, but like there was such a high bar that we
Yeah.
had for people to like kind of.
Well, and it goes back to that, like us sitting in the galley that day after we had hung out for the first time. Like you just like you know what I mean? Like you just. And I'm like my to answer the question of like, has the way that I selected friends changed? I've always kind of been like, who you choose to have around you says more about you as a person than really anything else. So I definitely am like, it probably to my own fault, but I'm almost to the point, and I've said this to you before, where it's like it's hard for me to make friends at this point, because I'm like, I have my best friends. Like I have friends. You're not gonna like be that. So why would I waste my time? You know what I mean?
Well, and I've struggled with this for so long, and I've really tried to think about how to describe that to other people because
Yeah.
other people not only have they been like curious about that, but when I that's like advice that I try to give to people, and I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
When I see people be friends with people that are less than adequate, that I know that it's not good, I'm trying to like express like, oh, this is what you should do. The only thing that I can really say is that, and I think that our friendship and friend group embodies this, is that there's no one bar for your friends, and
Yeah.
nobody gets a pass for anything. You have to continue to show up as a friend, as maybe this is in your relationship with your partner. Like, it's not just like once you meet a certain threshold, like it's okay. And that's something that like Aubrey and I have talked about a lot, is like dealing with family. This is probably be a hot take for some people, but family doesn't get a pass just because they're family. That
Yeah.
doesn't give you an excuse to just like not be a good friend to your family member just because, oh, we're family. Like, you got to show up every day
Yeah.
and like be better to the people that you love. And
For
I think
sure.
that that's something that we do really well.
Oh, I agree. Especially like when we lived in the same area, like without a doubt, I could call you or Ian up and be like, "Hey, dude, I like need you to do this. I need you to pack right now because we're about to drive 3 hours to Washington D.C. and like you make it happen." It's funny because that literally happened. Like on
Spoiler
30
alert,
minutes
that did
notice.
happen.
Yeah, it's something that it just kind of happens. And it's like that being able to make quick decisions. Like I know within minutes of talking to somebody or meeting somebody, I know whether or not like we will be friends within minutes. And I don't know, it may not even be the words that are coming out of their mouth, but it's just something that you can feel of like, I probably will not be friends with you.
Yeah.
Or the opposite of like, I am going to be very good friends with this person.
And I think that that's the big takeaway there, for because I think that this is a subject that we both like can talk like very confidently about, and like other people can take, is like understanding what your requirements are from a friend.
Yeah.
And if you can't find anybody that meets that, that doesn't mean it's time to like back down the ladder
Yeah,
and
for sure.
say like you're way better off by yourself
Hmm.
than dealing with subpar friends. And
Well, one thing that's kind of interesting to me is I was just talking about this with my in-laws, that they have a family friend in their daughter is in the Navy now, and she's like really struggling with it. Like she wants to get out, and um I had asked them, I said, does she have a group of friends, like a consistent group? Does she have a group? And they're like, no, I think that's one of the biggest things. That's why she's miserable, is it's like her and her boyfriend. And it really, having like that solid group can make or break your opinions on the Navy. Like if you don't have that group of friends outside of the Navy, or like while you're in, that you hang out with outside of like doing your job, I can only assume it would be freaking miserable. And that is, again, I guess me being lucky. That's one thing that I got really, really lucky on, is like I found my group very early on in the Navy, and we all got lucky enough to like be stationed together. And so that's why, that's a big proponent to why I loved being in, is because I had that group. But like if you don't have that, it could be fucking miserable, I would assume.
I agree. And it's weird like looking back on it. I was literally just about to ask like, is that why you think that you enjoyed it so much? And maybe I'm just kind of a glass half empty person, and am like, oh, I still didn't like it even though that I had good friends, but like I still wouldn't change it now
Oh yeah.
because I gained these friendships because of that, and I wouldn't
Yeah.
have otherwise.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like like you said, I loved it, but don't get me wrong, like I loved it because of the things that it gave me in my life, not because I got to play with helicopters. Like that was not it. So I would never like go back and like rejoin, you know what I mean? It was all of the other stuff that it gave me, the ability to restart, my friends, my wife, the experiences that it gave me. Like I didn't like the job enough to do it when I got out, much less rejoin, you know what I mean? Like, so
Yeah. Well, and you touched on something there. I think, or I know, the real benefits of joining the military are not tangible.
right. Yep.
They are things that you will likely never be able to quantify. They give you a better work ethic, and this is just assuming the average person joining, but it gives you a better work ethic. It exposes you to a diverse group of people and allows you to have the opportunity to lead in like some capacity, and all of those things are super critical for like personal and professional development.
For sure.
But like
Yeah.
it's like you said, it's not your ability to like troubleshoot helicopters now that is really
Yeah.
the big takeaway.
Yeah. Absolutely.
What do you think was the most important thing that you took away of all of those things? We just talked about several. What do you think has been the most impactful, like still to this day, and maybe that something that other people should be
Yeah.
watching for?
Um, out of all the things we just talked about, the relationships that I've made, my wife, my friends, like those have most definitely been like the most impactful things in joining, because that's something that like you can't, that's not something that can be taught, that's not something that can be bought. That is like when you have that, when you have your wife and you have your friends or your husband or whatever, it just again makes no any whatever you're going through, military or not, it makes it so much easier. So that is probably what's the most has been the most impactful, is the relationships that I took away from it.
Yeah, well, and like I said, you're exposed to so many different types of people too,
Yeah.
that you can
Yeah.
really like quickly find out what you do and don't like,
Yeah.
and kind of help you guide your kind of decision making
And
when
that's
it comes to your friends
probably
and stuff.
and that's a really great point. That's probably why like I said, I can decide within minutes of talking to somebody if I'm going to be friends with them. And that's probably why, is because that you are exposed to so many people from you're exposed to so many different kinds of people from all over the country. So it's your ability to kind of read somebody and figure out what type of person they are very quickly. That is a skill that you get from being in, that you're not going to get from staying in your hometown. You know what I mean? Because you already know everybody. You don't need to figure them out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. If there was something that you could go back and change, and like let's say that you have to change something, or maybe even what was the thing that you regret the most
Yeah.
about
I,
the time?
I don't think that was going to be a really tough question, because I wouldn't change anything, because everything, like when you look back at it, everything happened for a reason. Um, and that kind of goes hand in hand with like what I regret. I think what I regret is like not deploying. I never had the opportunity to go on like a full deployment. Which I know obviously, like you deployed, and hearing about it, I know you hated it, as I'm sure everybody does. You're like away from your family, but I regret that, but I would never change it, because had I deployed, I probably would not be with my wife, because depending on when I deployed it, if I was gone for 8 months, I would not have been able to go and visit my wife, or have her come out to Virginia and visit me. So we wouldn't have been able to build the relationship that we built. And depending on when I deployed and stuff like that, would I have been as good of friends with you as I am now? You know what I mean? So I wouldn't change it, but that is probably the one thing about my Navy career that bums me out a little bit, is I never went on a full deployment. I went out to sea, you know what I mean? I did like underways for weeks at a time or whatever, but which was cool. But that piece is like missing. Like I feel like I didn't fully like serve my country because I wasn't deployed.
We talked about that with a couple other people, just like that feeling of kind of completeness, or like you kind of have the box checked of like what you set out to do. Like, oh, I haven't served my country until I've like done this, or like
Yeah.
until, you can kind of like easily keep raising that bar of like, oh, well, I haven't taken a bullet for this country, so
Yeah.
I like
Yeah.
didn't serve.
Right.
Um, why do you think that is, and like is it that you think that you would have gotten out of deploying that would be different had you done it, or how would you feel differently had you done it?
I think just checking the box. You know what I mean? That I really think that that's all that it would be. It would just be ticking that little box of like deployed, done. But you're always comparing yourself. Everybody compares themselves to other people. No matter what you say, it's human nature. So you're comparing yourself to like, especially now being a veteran and being out. And I talk to veterans all the time in my job of like I'm comparing what I did to like what they did, and it's or what other people have done, and it's like, man, I really like didn't fully do my part, you know what I mean? But you could look at it the other way of like, no, my first squadron was a training squadron where they trained air crewmen and pilots. My job was to make sure that they had helicopters that they could fly and they could learn, and then they could go on to be rescue swimmers or fly the helicopters. So like that was my part. Everybody has a cog in the wheel, but to me, not deploying, that's the one thing that like it probably would not have changed anything other than maybe my viewpoint on the Navy. I would have might have come back and actually disliked it. Other than the fact of it, I never checked that box. And it was just like the way that it worked out. It wasn't a personal choice. Just I went to a training squadron, and then the squadron I went to after that, when I transferred there, they were on their way back from a deployment, the deployment that you were on. Uh,
Right.
so it, yeah, I don't think it really would have changed anything other than negatively had I deployed. So that's why I wouldn't have changed it. But I would like to have that box checked and been able to tell people that I deployed. That's it.
Well, and I was just talking the other day about how like eval cycles and like deployment cycles and stuff like that is like there are so many things that are just beyond your control, like in the Navy. Like I was explaining to somebody the other day about how like I got to my command like 2 weeks sooner than like this other group of people, and that 2 weeks was the difference in me getting a better eval, which actually
Yeah,
allowed me to advance earlier than all of those people, even though that we were in the same like group. And
yeah,
just like really really small differences in time like have these huge like kind of resounding impacts on when you deploy, why, if you make rank or not. Like there's all of these different factors, and you just like you're dealing with something much bigger than yourself,
for
and
sure. Yeah.
I would be curious if you had actually deployed, if you would feel that, or
Yeah.
if you would feel that like checkbox was enough, or if that would have checked that box and added another box.
And I'm sure it would have, like you said, I'm sure it would like get to the point where it's like, I didn't get my leg blown off. Like I didn't serve my country. Uh,
Yeah.
because like I said, everybody has a cog in the wheel, whether you're a paper pusher or a cook or a Navy SEAL, like everybody has a cog in it. But you're right. I agree 100%. It would have checked that box, but then another box would have appeared of like, oh, I didn't deploy twice when there are people who did, or whatever. You know what I mean?
Right. No, absolutely. So we talked a little bit earlier about the fact that you really loved the Navy based on all of these experiences, the people, you kind of enjoy your job. What actually was the deciding factor on you getting out?
Yeah.
Because you would have been the one person to stay in
Yeah,
of
for
anybody.
sure.
Like you really talked openly about loving your job and like showing up to work. I mean, uh, that may be driven by the fact that you only work like maybe one day a week, it seemed like. Tim somehow I've never seen somebody with like sharper skates of like getting out of work. This dude was always pulling stunts to get out of work. Being a
Yeah,
family man, like there's that. There's
well, and I don't know if that was like my ability to like build relationships and like build like talk to people that like, but yeah, I mean, it was wild. Like I remember there was one time I said, hey, if I can jump high enough where I can hit my head on the ceiling, can I go home? And my supervisor was like, yeah, like let's see it. And I did it. And I was like, deuces. My
I remember you showing up to us hanging out, and we're like, "Dude, we thought you were working tonight." I think it was like a Friday night, and
it
we
was.
weren't gonna go out because you were working nights. And you show up at like 6 o'clock, and like, "Oh, I like jump up and smash my head on the ceiling. Look at this gash in my head. Like, at least we can go out now." Like, and I was like, "What?
Yeah.
Who are your bosses?"
Yeah. It just, I don't know. It
I mean, you
just,
love to see people in pain. Like, of course, I mean, if that was me, I'm giving the person the day off. Like,
yeah,
don't
I
come in
mean,
for a month. I don't know.
and that was just it. My RDC in boot camp, one of the pieces of advice he gave us at the end was like, and he was in aviation as well. He was an airframer, great dude. He at the end he said, if you are ever at work and somebody says you can go home, don't ever question it, whether they say it kidding or not kidding. Because if I, outside of being an RDC in my airframe shop, if I say, Brock, go home, and Brock says, really? I'm going to say, no, John, go home.
Yeah.
And for some reason, like in my head, that was like burned. It was like such a good piece of advice. And so anytime somebody was like, who wants to go home? I'd raise my hand. All right, McCarthy, go home. Or if they said, I'd make deals with like, hey, if I do this, like, can I go home? Oh yeah, sure. I do it. See ya. I'm out. Like, like I'm out because I make the same amount of money regardless if I'm there for 18 hours or if I'm there for 30 minutes. Like, I don't know why I remember that piece of advice out of all the advice that was given to me. If somebody says you can go home, fucking leave. Like,
Yeah.
don't question it. Just pack your shit and go. And that's what I did.
I think I was just like maybe so envious because I was like never in a like I don't ever remember somebody saying, "Oh, we're like really light on work. Like,
Yeah.
so let's send some people home." Like that literally didn't happen to me once in 4
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
Um,
And we
I don't
like
know.
at my first squadron, we had so many people there. Like our shop was massive. So like, and it was a training squadron. So like they did have like a lot of new sailors come in there too. Not only like air crewmen and pilots, but like technicians too. So there was just like a lot of people there. So that was like easy to be like, hey, you guys don't fucking need me. Like if I can throw this racquetball and like hit the stop sign, like can I go home? Like, sure. But then at my second squadron, they knew that I was getting out. So they were like, at that point, Jessica was pregnant and they knew I was getting out. They're like, you're leaving here in 8 months. Like you've mentally already checked out, like go to the doctor's appointments, like go do that. To go back to your original question of why did I get out? That was a really, really hard decision for me to make because I wanted to stay in. Unfortunately, I knew you and Ian were getting out and you were going to leave. But to me, I was like, I like this. Like I can make something of myself. It was a comfortable lifestyle, I guess. I was getting consistent money, but where we were stationed in Norfolk at that point, when it comes time for me to make that decision, I have a family. I'm married. My wife is pregnant. I am a dad already. Like I have a 3 or 4 year old now at that point who I've fully, like she's fully my daughter. Like that's my daughter. It was like not a good area to raise kids. My wife was miserable in Virginia. She was away from her family. She obviously was like very good friends with you guys, but you guys were leaving. So like she didn't have her group outside of our group. And so her group would have been me and our daughters. You know what I mean? But and me staying in also would have meant like leaving. And one thing I never really realized when I would go out to sea for a couple weeks, how fucking hard that was on my wife. Like my daughter tells me now, it's stories about like they would drop me off at the ship in the morning when I would leave. and like mom just cried all day. And like it was, man, I'm getting like freaking choked up.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm
Yeah,
feeling this too. Like, yeah,
yeah,
that's really
and
sad.
it, like I never realized it, but to me I was like hanging out with my best friend and my friends at work, and we were dicking around out to sea and like
Drinking
having fun.
monsters and eating cowtail. Like,
Yeah, yeah, like I was having so much fun, but like my wife is not. My wife is like really struggling. So it really came down to like what is the best move for my family, and that getting out and moving to Idaho, like that was the best move for my family, for everybody's happiness. And at that point I felt like I had had enough experience on my resume where like I can figure it out, like I can make equal money, if not better money, and I'll wing it. We'll figure it out.
yeah. Have you, this might be kind of a hard question, and kind of put you on the spot a little bit, but have you ever been resentful of that?
No, no. Well, dang it. I my gut instinct, my gut instinct was no, but at very first, yes. I wouldn't say resentful, just like lost. And so maybe that turned into a little bit of resentment, but like when I got out, that transition was really fucking hard for me because again, caring about people's perception, when I got out, I went to kind of like a family reunion, so to speak. And so now I'm no longer like, oh, I'm like in the Navy. I'm like, I'm now out of the Navy. I don't know what I'm doing. Like I don't have a job fully like lined up, but I'm moving to Idaho. And so like it was fucking hard. And I went into the reserves, and I remember like my second drill weekend there. So like I'd been out of the Navy about a month or a couple months. I was like, how do I deploy? What can I do to like go back to be full time, but like be here in Idaho? And it was tough, man. Like I was working construction, and I didn't really like that. I had gone from being a military guy to like now I'm working construction, like not making good money at all, struggling hardcore. I mean, we were fucking broke, dude, bad. And so I remember this was like kind of a pivotal moment for me. I remember just like getting into this argument with my wife, like I got out of the Navy because of you and I'm fucking miserable.
Oh boy.
Yeah, and I remember like in my bathroom just being like, I hate it here. Like I fucking hate it here. Like this is miserable. I want to go back in the Navy, because that's what I knew. And my wife fucking handled that with grace and was just like, I know you're fucking miserable here because you're figuring it out. We are gonna figure it out. You're gonna find the next thing that you love. And that was like, okay, let's figure it out. And then that's when I kind of jumped into car sales.
Well, and I think that's such like a difficult transition because like just so much even harder than anything else because you're, you know, joined like relatively young. You come to Virginia, you find your identity. You've like
Yeah.
got this new thing that's going, and like you get married and like you're doing all these other things, which are kind of like pushing you along. But like the foundation of like what got you there was just like ripped out from under you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like you get out, you move 3,000 miles away, you don't have a job, like probably less of a plan than you would have liked.
Yeah.
And
Well, and I
like
had
all was
like,
for the family thing.
yes. Yeah. And I had like irons in the fire and stuff like that I was like in my head getting out. I was like, I'm good. Like I have A, B, C, D, E like lined up. If the A doesn't work out, but like I was pulling those fucking irons out left and right, and they're all cold. Like all of them.
They
Like
come
nothing
out
panned
real
out.
quick.
Real, oh yeah, dude. Like not one
What
of
were the
them.
what were the things that you had kind of lined up?
So working for Micron, And that was kind of like my own doing. Like they had said, like, reach out to us when you're here, but I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to go back to like being a technician, so I never like really reached out to them. But I got into like fugitive recovery a little bit, like
I
bounty
remember
hunt.
that.
Yeah,
That was
like
so weird, dude.
yeah. And like really like loved the idea of that. And it was like, that's a whole other story. But it ended up just being like kind of some like sketchy, like wild west cowboy shit. And I was like, I am not getting involved in this. Like, I'm gonna end up needing to shoot somebody, and I am not a police officer. Like, I'm gonna go to fucking jail. Like,
Yeah.
this is not. So Jess hated that, so I stopped doing that very quickly.
We're gonna have to
um
save that for another podcast because that might be its own story in
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah. That was wild, dude. Like, you boot somebody's door in to like go and arrest them. That's fucking eye-opening. I was like, what am I getting myself into? Like, holy shit. So yeah, I stopped doing that. And then working construction, with my father-in-law, that was freaking awesome because I was able to like get there and like 2-3 days later like start making money. But it wasn't good money. He was paying me what I was worth. I had never done carpentry before. He was paying me well for what I knew, you know what I mean? And of course there was like, if I'd stayed with that, I would have like made more money doing it, but that's not what I wanted to do. We were freaking struggling, and yeah, it was tough. And then when I first got there, I told my mother-in-law that I wanted to get into car sales, and she had said, "Oh, I know some of the managers over at this dealership. I can reach out to them." So I said, "Yeah." So she reached out to them, and I went, and they said, "Yeah, send them in." I went in, and I got a phone call like a week later, and they're like, "Dude, we're just like not hiring right now. Like, we're going into the slow season." So to me, I was like, "Fuck, that didn't even pan out. Like, that was a sure thing." And then I kind of like stayed. Then I had like this big blow up with Jess, and I was freaking miserable and hated the reserves and all this shit. And then but I like stayed consistent with that, and then I eventually ended up getting into car sales.
You touched on something there that has been kind of a tricky spot that I have found myself in too. You said something where you got out for the family reasons, but then when it came down to like getting into a fight, you said, I got out for you.
Mm-hmm.
And like that is such like that's not a good place to be because it
No.
kind of like I think almost deep down you something you never want to say, but you kind of associate
Yeah.
the feeling with. And like I can't even imagine how stressful that is, like coming back to, or going to a place that you've never been and you're like supporting a family. And
Yeah.
I think that there's something that's innermost to, this isn't like a sexist thing, but I legitimately think that there's something that about guys that
Yeah.
we have, like where we want to provide for our family and have a lot of our self-worth tied into taking care of the people that rely on us. And yeah, I can't even imagine how
Yeah.
stressful that was.
Yeah. It was tough. And that, I don't know what it was, but like I got really into like listening to motivational speeches like on
Okay.
YouTube. And
Okay.
I remember it's it's funny. Well, I'll tell the story, then I'll tell this other part. But yeah, I got like really into motivational speeches, and like my mindset just flipped of like, this is where you are now. This is, you were in the Navy and now you're here. This is not where you are going to be for your whole life. Like, just fucking weather the storm, put your boots on, go to work, figure it out, and like it will get better. And then so like my mindset changed. And I remember this kind of side story that I was going to say. There was like one particular YouTube video that I would like get in my car on my way to go be a carpenter, and I would like listen to this all the time. And it was like super powerful to me. About like 6 months ago, it like popped up on my YouTube feed, and I haven't listened to it in like years, since I was like just got out and fucking struggling. And I was like, oh my God. And I listened to it, and I drove to work with like actual tears in my eyes because like I did it. Like I made it. You know what I mean? Like I did everything that he's talking about. and it just like this overwhelming sense of like gratitude for the circumstance that I was in, for me like doing what I had to do, just getting there. It was the weirdest thing. Like, it's just overwhelming sense of like gratitude. And I literally like got teared up, like driving to work.
Well, it's amazing how in that moment when you're just like feeling completely destroyed, how it literally just feels like the walls are coming in around you,
Yeah.
and it's just like it literally is the end of the world. And kind of like fast forward and having the benefit of hindsight, you like look back and you're like, oh, that shit, like that
Yeah.
is so small now,
Yes. Yeah.
and you empathize with your past self of like being more small-minded, and you like don't know what you know now. And I think that is having regular moments like that. I know it is kind of an interesting way to think about like personal growth, but I think that having regular, or maybe irregular, but every so often experiencing that
Yeah.
signifies that you are making progress.
Yep.
And like, because a lot of times you don't see it. And like, that was one of my like big kind of overarching themes coming into this conversation, is like sometimes you don't know when you're getting better. You
Yeah.
don't get to see it. Sometimes you get like a glimpse into it, where like that particular instance, you like go back to this old thing and it kind of like reminded you of that moment, but you never get to see yourself develop in real time. And we often need to hear from other people that like,
Yeah.
hey, but you're doing good. And like this is why this conversation is cool, is because I like the third party here gets to comment on like, hey,
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
something that I've seen in you that's changing.
Yeah.
And I think that we naturally don't give ourselves enough credit. As you get older, you're like become more humble and like give yourself less credit, and we kind of know less just by default of like accepting that there's more out there that we don't know.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Well,
now
time just get like you get busy and then you don't realize that like, oh shit, it's been 2 years since I was like in that position. And you'd said like you never really like look back. Time just like flies by and you never really like reflect on it. So like having that moment was like super cool to me, to like hear something that I used to listen to while I was struggling and then listen to it after the struggle. And I was like, oh wow.
do you think that that type of thing is helpful for anybody that may be in like a difficult portion, or like if not, what do you think that is, maybe you could reference that video, like something about it that was really like that
Yeah.
stood out to you. What is it that people should hear that maybe are in that position?
Uh, I think that you need to find a way to like motivate yourself, because motivation is like, part of me feels like motivation is like bullshit. Like it just is like it comes and goes, you know what I mean? But you also need, for me, the biggest thing, like why I would listen to it is I like there's so much negativity in the world that like you gotta like block that out sometimes and like just feed yourself some like positive stuff and like a different way to like look at things.
Do you think that you can have too much of that?
I do. I do, because it needs to like really resonate with you. So if you like listen to that type of stuff, or read motivational books, or like however you consume it, eventually it all just like jumbles together and it loses how impactful it is. So there like there are times I'll listen to it now, like if I'm having a tough month at work or like whatever, but I like don't listen to that type of stuff all the time, because it loses how impactful it is. And you won't get that like little jolt of positivity, or that like little jolt of motivation that comes and goes really quick, but you need that sometimes. So I would say don't listen to that shit all the time, because it's just going to be, it's like when you've heard the same song a million times, like you're not really listening to it.
Yeah, you're kind of like it just instantly kind of goes on
Yeah.
autoplay or whatever in your head.
In one ear out the other, where you should, if you're going to listen to that type of thing, you should listen to it to like listen to it. Don't just like have it as background noise.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that that's right. So you get out of the Navy, you have like all these irons that like don't end up working out. You end up like landing the job in car sales. I kind of want to pick up here, and I want to point out that it's interesting to me that I remember talking with you very early on in your time in the Navy, like when we first kind of were getting to know each other. And you've been talking about car sales since then. That was literally 2015.
Yeah.
And you've now been doing it for, I don't know, a couple of years now.
3 years. Yeah.
3 years.
Yeah.
I have like a hard time wrapping my brain around that, because it's like I on one hand like respect so much that like you literally set a goal and you're like, I want to do this, and you like haven't forgotten about it, and you went out there and did it. On the flip side of that, I'm like, it's weird, and I have a hard time understanding how your goals didn't change amidst this time when your entire life was kind of like flipped upside down.
Yeah. So yeah, I was talking about my buddies, my group of friends that I had before I joined. One of them had gotten into car sales like a year or two before I joined the military. And I had watched him like flourish in this, and it like offered him a way better life than like he was living before. He was having a new kid and his baby, and he like jumped into car sales and like immediately started crushing it, and was like, you could just watch his like life increase. Like he was just like making so much momentum, like bought a house and like was just like able to afford like all of this like cool stuff. Like we'd go out and he'd pay for everybody, and it was, so to me, I was like, okay, so there's definitely money in car sales or just sales in general. I was also working in sales, but for Best Buy, like making $10 an hour, $12 an hour, something like that. So like there's no money in that. And I've always loved sales. Like I really loved working at Best Buy, which is probably why I stayed there longer than I should have, because I love like talking to people. I love like making those connections and like helping people, and like it's just, and it's something I'm good at. So you got to like kind of lean into your gift. You know what I mean? Like if you're given this gift, don't freaking waste it. Like use it. And like that's like what you're meant to do, kind of thing. So I've like known about car sales a little bit because my good friend had like done it for a couple of years before I joined, and I knew he made very good money doing it, and I enjoyed sales. So to me, I was like, I enjoy sales and I'm decent at it. My friend is in this particular type of sale and he makes a lot of money doing it. So that's what I want to do. And he had offered me like a salesman job before I joined the Navy to like stop me from going. He's like, dude, I think I could get you in as like a car salesman, even though you don't have any car sales experience. And for some reason I was like, no, I don't want to do that yet. Like I need to go do this. So that's kind of like how I like was introduced to it. And I have always had a good, like I've always been able to talk to people. So to me, I was like, okay, when I get out, like that should solve my problem. Like I should be able to make good money, or at least the same amount of money I was making in the military, and go back to like what I was doing before, which I know I really liked. I went talked to the dealership when I first got out, and they, like I said, they were like, we're not hiring right now. But, and this was in like November or December of 2018. But the hiring manager was like, but I really liked you. Like I would love to have you work for me, but I can't hire you right now. I'm going to hire in the springtime. Like I'm going to start hiring people to start in March. So I will reach out to you. So in my head, I'm like, okay, that's past. He didn't, like, I'm not going to get that job. And then the mindset change. And so I called him in the middle of January, like a month later. And I was like, hey, just wanted to check in to see if you had started hiring again. And he's like, kind of like chuckles. He's like, no, like I have not started hiring. I'm probably going to start hiring people in February. So in a couple weeks. He said, if you don't get a call from me within the first week of February for an interview, call me back. I said, okay. I had kind of like, again, as a blow to the ego, dang it, like they're not going to hire me. So I forgot about it. Fast forward 3 weeks later, it's Monday morning on like February 2nd at 9 a.m. I get this call, like the first Monday of February. As the dude just walked in the door, I get a phone call. He said, hey, are you available for an interview today at, noon? Yeah. So I went down and I interviewed, and some of the managers were not there. So he like comes back in after an interview with a bunch of people. And he said, hey, so-and-so is not here. I'm going to call you to like schedule a second interview. And again, I'm like, dang it. Like I blew it. Like he's being nice. Like I didn't get the job. But I said to him, I said, if it's a time thing, I have time. I'll wait for so-and-so to get here. And he like kind of laughed, and he's like, no. I promise you, like I'm not blowing you off. Like really, I will call you. I was like, okay. 3 or 4 days go by, and I was at a job site, still working construction with my father-in-law. And I was like, he has not called me. Like it's been 3 days. For some reason, I open my phone, go to my voicemail, like look through my calls, don't see any missed calls from him, go to my voicemail. There was a voicemail from 3 hours earlier that day that said, hey, this is so-and-so, was hoping you'd be available for that follow-up interview today at 2:00. It was 1:00.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So I call him. I'm like, hey, Charlie, I'm so sorry. Like I never got a notification for the voicemail. I would love to come interview. I apologize. Like I didn't confirm with you. Is that interview still available? And he's like, yeah, man, it's 1:00. Like I planned on 2. Perfect. So I like ran home, took a shower, changed my clothes, like darted over to the dealership. The manager that I was waiting to interview with walks in, and he goes, well, I think I know everything I need to know about you. Seems like everybody likes you. So what's your favorite football team? And I was like, I'm a Bills fan. And he's like, oh God. Ugh. And I was like, hold it, whoa. What's your football team? And he's like, the best football team in the country. And I said, you're a Patriots fan, aren't you? And he's like, that's right. And so I very jokingly was like, all right, I'm out of here. And I like go to stand up, and he just starts busting out laughing. He's like, I freaking like you, man. And then they offered me the job.
Wow. I don't think that I knew that. I
Yeah.
hadn't heard that.
Yeah.
Like for anybody that doesn't know you, like there's nothing that's more of a you story than that. And I think that your ability to joke with people in like a way that is kind of like taunting a little bit, but you know where the line is most of the time, have stepped over that maybe 3 or 4 times. We won't get into that on the podcast, but people love that.
Yeah.
Do you think that was what when you're telling this story, I'm like imagining each time that this guy is laughing, this guy like loves you. Like when you're like calling, like, oh, is there like, I just wanted to see if you were starting to hire, like he knows that you're hungry, and like you want this. Do you think that was what set you apart, or is there some kind of impression that you made on him that you think is valuable when approaching like a job interview, that one that you really want?
So this is a great question. And I was thinking of a way to like bring this up, because I think it's very important. With sales, especially, one massive component to that is following up with a customer. Like if you don't sell whatever you're selling, if you don't sell them something, call them and follow up with them. And like you need to get over the fact of like you're bugging somebody. And so the dealership that I work at, they don't hire people with car sales experience, because they want you to sell cars the way that they want to train you. They don't want the bad habits. So I think me, quote unquote, following up with this dude so many times was it proved that like I'm not afraid to bother somebody, and like I'm willing to do this part of the job that is like crucial to the job. And I've never sold cars before, but I'm like doing it to him. I'm following up with him. It is also kind of like changed now, knowing that, and like how to follow up with somebody and like make that kind of uncomfortable phone call because you feel like you're bothering them. That can be used in any job. My brother was like he moved out here recently and he was struggling with finding a job. He wasn't like getting called back. So I called him. I said, dude, this is what you need to do. You need to call the manager and say, hey, this is Tim. I just wanted to call and follow up with you on our interview. I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me. But I wanted to follow up and see if you maybe had some other questions that you didn't get an answer to, or if there was any sort of progress in the decision on whether or not you wanted to hire me, or if maybe you needed another interview with me, what time works best for you with that? And like that, he was like, dude, I can't do that. And I'm like, why? Like why wouldn't you? And then so I like gave him a couple other word tracks. I said, dude, you could literally call this person and set your own follow-up appointment or follow-up not appointment, but your follow-up interview. Because one of the jobs they were like, well, we need to like do a second interview. That's like standard procedure. So I said, call them and say, hey, I want to follow up on this second interview. What day works best for you on that? Did you want to get together on Thursday or did you want to get together on Wednesday? Like you're setting your own follow-up or your own interview. You know what I mean? And so he did that. And they were like, yeah, can you come in on Thursday? And like gave them an either or option. Like I'm giving you two options to pick from. And they're like, well, let me look. Yeah, I'm available on Thursday. Perfect. Morning or afternoon, like you just do it yourself. That's fucking powerful stuff. And he was like, dude, that's crazy. But like nobody does that. But I was hungry and I like needed this job. Like I needed to make money more than I was making. So like I wasn't going to take this dude's no until he told me, no, I'm not hiring you. Because he kept like kind of not stringing me along, but like I was misinterpreting what he was saying for like turning me down. But I was like, he's going to have to tell me he's not hiring me because I'm going to keep bugging this dude.
I think that's so powerful. Like kind of your hungriness and like willingness to kind of look dumb and like overcome your like that internal part of you that's saying, hey, you blew this interview, like
Yep.
whatever, and be willing to kind of like follow up and potentially you're never going to look stupid, but for some reason you think that you will.
For sure.
Why do people lack that follow up? I want to kind of like start to unpack like what you know about sales, what
Sure.
you've kind of like learned about sales since you have been doing this the last couple of years, and kind of like the military's influence over that. But why do you think that people lack that follow up element, whether it be in sales, something else, or in this particular circumstance? Why do people not follow up on the job?
It's because they either don't know how to make it sound professional the way that I just did, or I think more importantly, or I think that the actual reason is they're too concerned about bothering somebody. They don't want to be a nuisance. They don't want to bother somebody. So like in sales, they don't want to follow up with somebody because they don't want to bother them. And then if they bother them, then they're going to lose the sale. But like if you don't follow up with them and set that appointment or ask the tough questions, you're not going to get the sale either way. So it goes back to that like zero risk, high reward situation. And I think that's why. And I think outside of sales, as far as like that example with my brother, I think it's just the lack of knowledge. Like nobody's ever taught him like, hey, you can give this person an either or question. And it's way harder to say no to an either or question than it is to say no to an open-ended question of like, when did you want to get together? Well, I'll have to check, but did you want to get together on Wednesday or Thursday? Oh, well, I didn't give you I'll check as an option. I gave you two options. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, and in a way too, you're showing some initiative, but you're also like controlling the conversation.
Yep.
And I would love to hear kind of like your thoughts on that. But like one of the things about giving people options like that is that's why open-ended questions are so bad, because
Yes.
especially in some like a sales type of job, because it just opens the door to like whatever kind of weird concerns that, in this case, the interviewer or like your potential sale is like thinking about, that kind of like worry. But like when you narrow it down for them,
Mm-hmm.
you're kind of setting the pace and saying, hey, like
Yeah.
this is what we can do.
For sure. Yeah. And I think as far as like getting a job, being able to control the situation or control the conversation is very powerful. And it shows your ability to be a leader too, and like take control of like tough situations.
How do you take control of like a conversation? Maybe talk about that generally, and then maybe talk about maybe a situation or like a bad situation that you had to like take control of before.
So there's a lot of ways that you can control a situation. And in any form of sales, you're asking your way to the sale. You never want to like tell somebody. Of course, you like tell somebody the features of a vehicle, or this is the price, or of course you have to tell people, but like a lot of the momentum of a sale is built with questions like, what are you going to be using it for? Did you want cloth or leather? So now you're like narrowing it down what they want, giving them options as far as like how to buy it or whatever. So that's like how to control a conversation is I could talk for 2 hours on like how to control a situation. It's all like asking the right questions, but I think it's also like not like don't be afraid to like ask the tough questions that need to be asked. And as far as like handling a I guess like a tough question, something I never even thought of was people fucking hate car salesmen. Like they really do. So of course I interact with people that they come in with their walls up and they're just kind of like grumpy and they don't want to be there. They think I'm a schmuck and like, I'm just the dirty car salesman. So I've definitely like gotten into not physical altercations, but like verbal altercations with people. And there's a couple ways that you can do it. When I first started selling car sales or when I first started selling cars and I was piss and vinegar and just like fresh out of the military and like, you can't tell me shit. My reaction to like somebody yelling at me, a customer like raising their voice to me, is a lot different than it is now. Because when you raise your voice to somebody who's raising your voice, they're just going to get louder. So now, like just the other week, I had a customer who was like very upset about what we were asking for a vehicle, and he was like yelling at me. And every time he would say something to me and I responded, I would get quieter and quieter. And every time, and he, for the first couple of sentences, was getting louder and louder. But eventually he was like matching my energy, and kind of subconsciously, I was able to like get him to fucking lower his voice. Like, you know what I mean? Like I talked a little quieter and a little quieter, and then there's a lot to it, your presence, your body language. So as I'm talking quieter, I'm sitting a little bit further back in my chair, so I look a little bit smaller, and I'm not trying to like come off confrontational, and then it allows him to like calm down. And yeah.
I can see you, like I can literally picture you in your element doing that. um, yeah, this is anybody that listens to this podcast is probably never going to want to buy a car from you. So they're going to learn all your tricks and be on to you. What do you think? But you've talked about a couple things here that you think are important. What do you think is the most important part of sales? And the reason I ask that is because I think that sales is such a it's kind of, I equate it with like marketing. You're kind of gonna do that in every job that you
Mm-hmm.
do, whether it doesn't matter if you're like an enterprise salesperson, if you're a car salesman, like you have to sell yourself to get the job. Like you're always selling something.
Yeah.
You're always marketing yourself for the next position, and it's so much of that kind of boils down into positioning. What do you think is the most important takeaway that you've
So,
learned about sales just kind of in this role?
well, and this kind of goes, I think you had asked me like a couple questions at once. And I think one of the questions that you had asked me was like, what set you apart from being in the military? Like, how did that set you apart? So these two things kind of like these two questions I can answer in one. I think the most important thing and what set me apart was you need to be comfortable being uncomfortable. Like that is like you need to like really be okay with stepping out of your comfort zone and and like just being uncomfortable, asking the tough questions, be okay with somebody like being a little frustrated with you, because you both want the same thing in the end, but sometimes people get a little frustrated. So whenever I train somebody, that's one thing that I say all the time is, dude, you need to be comfortable being uncomfortable. Like when you're going down and you know that they're going to be a little bit upset about the price of this car or the monthly payment or whatever, because the math didn't pan out correctly the way that they thought it would, you need to be comfortable being uncomfortable. That's the most important thing. And I think that that's what, like, how that set me apart is, like, I've been screamed at in the military. I've been uncomfortable. So like, I'll say the tough I'll ask tough questions. I'll say the tough thing, the things that are tough to say. Like, I don't mind being uncomfortable. That's kind of like my new comfort zone at work, is like, I'm cool with it.
Well, and that's such an advantage that people have having been former service or whatever, is like, you will probably never be that uncomfortable again.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
there are so many instances that you can think about in your time. Like, maybe it wasn't the whole time, but there were, I know that everybody was uncomfortable the first time you went and got in the shower in boot camp. Like, that was
Yep.
a weird
Yep.
experience.
Yep.
And there were so many times, like, maybe you are standing aboard in front of all these people, like, you're doing things that are just so not natural to what
Yep.
you kind of your inner person wants to do. I think that that's good advice. It sounds kind of like woo woo on like the
Sure.
surface, because that's like, yeah, okay, yeah, we know that we want to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
You want something tangible?
What's the practical app, or just how do you apply that? Like,
Yeah, sure.
how is it that people can practice that? Is there something that you do to kind of like remind yourself, and maybe outside of like a car sales, like, you get to ask those types of hard questions every day, but like, what are some things that you have maybe found that like kind of can keep people fresh generally, with that kind of like
When it's
spine
like,
shivering, like,
yeah,
oh,
this
I
is
don't like this.
uncomfortable. I think, oh gosh, yeah, that is a freaking tough question, dude, because it's hard for me to like pick out one like tangible thing, but to like, I guess, to like keep you fresh. I don't know, man. I don't know how to answer that. Just, I guess, like, going for it, just like with my, like, with giving my brother, he like did not want to do that, and I'm like, dude, I'm telling you, like, just do it. Here's what to say, just do it and it will work out. Eh, I guess there's really like, that's a freaking hard question, dude. Oh gosh, I don't know. I don't know, like, how to like stay fresh, or like stay comfortable being uncomfortable outside of uncomfortable situations. I guess just put yourself in uncomfortable situations. If you're a single person and you go out, go talk to the girl, go talk to the guy, like, do things outside of your job that like may make you uncomfortable. You know what I mean? It's hard. It does sound woo woo, and I totally know that, but like, it's crucial. If I were to like try to give you something tangible, that like, what the most important thing in sales would be, it's all about making a friend. Just focus on like making a friend first before anything else. Like, make that initial connection. Like, find something that you can bond over, whether you have the same favorite sports team, you also have a daughter, or you grew up here. Oh, I visited there one time and I saw this, or fishing, whatever. Like, find something, and once you have like a common ground, build on that. That would probably be a little bit more tangible than being comfortable being uncomfortable.
No, I like that. And I don't think that that's people's first inkling, especially when considering like a job. But there are so many little cues that people will give when you're going into, like, whether it be a job interview or something. People, listen to their accent. If they mention something about the traffic coming in, like, or
Hmm.
the weather or whatever, just like dive on those things.
Yeah.
And
Pictures
yeah.
that they have in their office, or like look at the little trinkets on their desk. If they got a freaking signed baseball or a picture of their family, like, oh, like, how old are your kids? Oh, they're 17 and 14. Oh, so you're in teenage phase. I have a 3-year-old and a 9-year-old. So I'm headed that way. Like just anything, like just find a common ground and find it quickly, like right off the jump, because once you find that, people's walls will start to kind of break down.
Well, and with the comfortable, uncomfortable thing, I think that this is also like very woo woo, but you really, I guess, a way that I think about it, and it's very not tangible, but I know that you and I think very similarly when we think about where we want to be in 5 years and like maybe 10 years in terms of like what I think of when I think of success and like what that looks like. And I think about like how hungry we are for that and like how badly we want, and comparing that a little bit to, okay, my actions that I've done up until now have gotten me here. And like, if I continue doing what I've been doing, will that get me to where I want to be? And
Right.
it probably won't. You probably can't say yes to that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that means you just got to be willing to do stuff that's hard. And
Yeah.
like, yeah, whether that's, you're talking to the girl, or you're, you're calling up the hiring manager, or whatever it is, like you got to be willing to look dumb a lot.
Yeah.
I think that that's some really good content on sales. And I think that that's, while woo woo, we've got some like tangible things that people can be thinking about. From a career perspective, like, this has been a very long kind of overarching story of like, you've got the job now. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
you ended up getting the position. You're like super successful at what you do. You're probably won't be here to like brag about yourself, but like you're a trainer for like new people at your work, like probably high up on the list of like when people are thinking like looking to promote.
Yeah.
What what do you think about it now? What do you think about where you are? What's
Yeah.
next?
Well, I definitely always have the mindset of like, what is the next level? So like to me, yeah, the next level would be to like step into like a sales manager role or some sort of like leadership role. Um, you had touched on me being a trainer. One really cool thing, and I've kind of taken a couple salesmen under my wing now that were given to me, that I was told like, hey, you're kind of like, you're their manager without being their manager. So like I will go down and talk to their customers and try to close the deal, and I will train them and teach them. One like really cool thing that I never thought about until I started doing it, that I freaking love, is like watching somebody, being a part of somebody going from the situation I was in and like struggling to like, hey, if you do this, this, and this is like, you can be successful, and this is the type of lifestyle that you can live. And I freaking love that. Like I've seen it a couple times with the guys that I've trained up. It's like teaching them and showing them how they can be successful in something, and like watching their life change before their eyes in a matter of months, because they're like applying the things that I'm teaching them and like guiding somebody. I love that, and I've like never really been able to do it, but that is like a passion of mine that I never knew that I had.
Teaching in general?
Uh I don't know about like teaching in general, but like mentoring maybe, and like helping somebody advance their life in sales in particular, and like opening these doors for them and like letting them learn off of me and showing them the right things to say and do and what to do, and like watching them go from, kind of struggling to like, dude, I'm like crushing it now, and like this is like, I now like have the ability to do this. Like one of the kids I was trained, he like called his girlfriend up and was like, hey, do you want to go on vacation? We're like to San Diego. And she's like, yeah, sure. And he's like, cool. And he like bought tickets and he like paid for like this whole week-long vacation. He's like, dude, I would have never been able to do that as a prison guard. And that's what he did before. And so just like seeing how excited he got to like be able to do these things and like live this lifestyle that he wants is really amazing to see.
Where do you think that you get that desire to kind of like help other people? Because I think kind of hearing your story, or let me rewind it. People that generally want to do that are people who have like had the door opened for them by
Hmm.
somebody else in their past. And that doesn't seem to be the case with you. Like you kind of forged your own path. There wasn't somebody that came alongside and put their arm around you and kind of like walked you through the process.
Yeah.
Where do you think that that desire comes from?
Uh, I think it's just like I've always I've always liked to help people. It's like when I was a kid, I wanted to be a police officer or a firefighter. Of course, I've always wanted to help people. I don't know if that comes from like being a freaking comic book nerd and like kind of wanting to be like a superhero and like help people or whatever it is. But I also have never really I try not to forget where I came from. So like in that scenario, helping this kid like become successful, I was in his position 2 years ago. So like if I can help him go from that position to my position, I owe it to him to do that because I know what it's like and I've been there. And so like as I become more successful and kind of like advance financially and within my job and stuff like that, I try to not forget, about the time that I had to go buy 5 boxes of mac and cheese because I had $7 in my account for the next week. So I needed to eat mac and cheese every day because it was 98 cents a box. You know what I mean? And I try not to forget about that because it's easy to like once you start making money, it's really easy to forget that. And I've seen it time and time again in my industry of people that have been doing it for years and years, and you like know that they've forgotten what it's like to struggle. And so I try to like keep that fresh in my mind and like be grateful. So yeah, just if I can help him go to that next level, then I owe it to him. That's just the way I've always been.
Well, and I think that you also, it's maybe you don't even realize it, but like that from like the third party perspective here, when somebody is really good at something, they do it, they excel, but there's like a cap in the satisfaction that you can get from doing
Yeah,
something that you're really good at.
for sure.
What raises that cap is teaching and giving that to other people. And that
Hmm.
also is like, it says something about you as a person, but it also, to be truly great at something, you have to be able to teach it to other people.
Yep,
And if you aren't at that stage, like you're not there yet.
for sure. And I think to like go off that selfishly, one reason why I really like doing that, like this mentorship, is I get to now be the one who, when you can't close this deal, you're not able to make it work, I'm the one that will go down and close it or at least try. So to me, like that is the next challenge is like, okay, now I get to work with the customers that like these salesmen can't close the deal. Let me go see if I can. And like give me a little bit of backstory. What do they want? What's going on? Okay. And then like going down and closing that deal is like exhilarating to me.
Yeah.
Like that it's just like so freaking cool. And it's also cool to like see some of the newer guys watch me do what I do and just afterwards be like, holy shit, dude, like that was freaking dope. You know what I mean?
Yeah. What do you think that the military has taught you about people, other than we talked about the being uncomfortable thing? What did you learn about people from the military that has helped you excel in sales? Because if there's one thing that like everybody knows when they get out, it's like, how people work. We know what
Yeah.
motivates us. It's such like a raw organization, and
Yeah.
the military as a whole. But what would you say?
Well, it definitely going back to like you are meeting and working with people from all over, from all walks of life. You kind of like without really knowing it, you figure out how certain personalities tick. So like being able to know okay, this dude, he seems kind of like an asshole. He's not an asshole though. He's just like, he's from New York. So like when he asks a question, it sounds really rude. He's not being rude. He's just asking the question. Or the dude from the South who like has the Southern draw and like talks real slow and like he's not dumb. That's just his accent. Like that's though he grew up talking that way. So being able to like identify those things, I think has been a massive advantage.
Yeah, you're certainly exposed to all sorts of accents and backgrounds, and kind of makes you almost more accepting and
Yeah.
like you said, more ready and able to target the types of people. And you also your experiences are almost more diverse too, because and it almost gives you more talking points. Like, oh, I like had this friend that like was from where you're from or
Yeah.
whatever, and you
Yeah,
kind of like
exactly.
can utilize those memories, and even if they're just one off, but like you're throwing a bunch of lines out with people and
Hmm.
trying to see what they kind of bite on, and then build
Yep.
on it.
Yeah.
what what's next for you? What are you hungry for now? You kind of obviously maybe a managerial role at your work, but like what other things are you working on and you really really want
Yeah.
in the next
Um,
couple of years?
Obviously this podcast, right? Like this is something that you and I are passionate about, and I've had fun doing this, and I'm hungry to see that grow. I do YouTube and stream on Twitch kind of in my free time, and I would really like to see that excel and potentially be a viable option for a business. Um, so doing that, and then also buying a business like we talked about with Nate, finding something that will kind of, I can be my own boss, not necessarily that I want to like step away from car sales, but maybe trying that out too.
Yeah, I feel like we've talked so much about like how we were so unaware of the different options and things that
Hmm.
are out there, and it like it's kind of overwhelming in some ways, but empowering to think about all these new things, to kind of new challenges to take on, and like new ways to kind of like level up your life,
Yeah.
and learn new things and grow. I kind of want to close out here. What do you think is the one thing that people can learn from you about life, sales,
Sure.
Navy, military? What would it be?
Don't overthink things, first of all. Like just
Or don't think at all.
yeah, like don't sweat the small stuff, and it's almost all small stuff. Like really just like make the decision and like do that. Uh Also, I guess the other thing would be like there's money to be made out there, and like you don't need a degree. You don't need a special training. Like the one cool thing about sales for me and like getting into this is it's made me realize that like there's money out there to be made, and like all you got to do is like go and get it, and focus on it and double down. And sales, for anybody that's listening that's like interested in getting into sales, sales is like the only job where you can jump into it with no college, no training, nothing, and make six figures. So there's money out there to be made. Just do some research and figure out what you're interested in and go for it.
I like both of those things, in particular the first part. You you've done a phenomenal job in your life generally, or at least since I've known you, of like not worrying about things too much. And one of the phrases that I used to describe you to your dad was um, happy go lucky, and like your calmness and like approach in life has like saved me from so many things. Like there have been so many circumstances where I have like been in a bad way, and your like calmness has like gotten me calm, because
Yeah.
I'm fucking high strung and
No,
whatever.
you're not.
Yeah,
You are. You
I'm
are.
trying to own it. No, I think that it's super admirable trait. You're very charismatic, got a lot of grace, and I think that's going to continue to take you places.
I appreciate that.
Happy to be doing this podcast with you, man. This is good.
Yeah.
Happy to have you as a friend, just in general.
Same. Hopefully this, I don't know, opens people's eyes to different opportunities, this particular episode. So somebody who's never considered a career in sales or, whatever, look into it. And you don't have to sell cars. You could sell anything, roofs. You could sell solar systems. You sell beds. Like, there's money to be made out there in all of it. Just go freaking look at it.
Everything is for sale at one point.
That's right.
That's very true. Well, cool. Dude, thanks so much. This has been great.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning in today. Your listenership helps me better educate people like you and the rest of our nation's military, both past and present, on building a successful life outside of military service. If you're looking for more ways the top vets are leading more effective lifestyles, building businesses, and using the resources designed specifically for you, press here for a selection of some of the best clips. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date, and I will be talking with you soon.